watching this postseason, it's weird for people at Houston because the Astros were bounced so early. But perhaps there are some takeaways from that. I'm sure that there are, and we've talked about some of them here. But as the Astros are looking to retool their team for 2025, I can't help but look at some of these stats. Like on the Yankees, Giancarlo Stanton is hitting 294 with a 1.179 OPS. Juan Soto, 333 batting average with a 1.106 OPS. Aaron Judge is still doing Aaron Judge postseason things, hitting 161 on average and 704 OPS. But we know the Astros have had some great postseason performances. Obviously, Jordan has great postseason numbers. Altuve's had some postseason success as well. He's one of the best postseason hitters in the history of baseball. But how much does seeing this, and that's not even mentioning the National League and just the incredible amount of runs that have been scored in the league championship series there. But putting all that into perspective, does this maybe jar the Astros into, and put into perspective just how offensively deficient this team is as currently constructed in light of the playoffs?
I don't think so much in terms of the playoffs. Giancarlo Stanton was a 233 hitter this year. In the postseason, he's doing legendary stuff. Going into the World Series, Stanton's played 36 career postseason games. He has 16 home runs. So Alex Bregman's 19 in 99 games. Oh, what an unbelievable postseason hitter. We've covered that before. Not really. Juan Soto is just a remarkable player. Probably now asking the Yankees for $1 billion, and he'll get closer to it than not. Maybe $600 million. And as you alluded to, Brandon, right, Judge has still had a pretty quiet postseason. Well, what if he has a hot World Series? You hope the stars shine. They're not always going to. Where else do you get some support from? Right? The Yankees have a very top-heavy order, but can you get just enough here and there from an Alex Verdugo at the bottom, Anthony Volpe at the bottom? The Dodgers just have a superior lineup. Basically to about everyone else in baseball, top to bottom, the depth of their lineup. You think of the Astros 2017, 19, and 21 teams. They just don't have the talent on their roster anymore that way. But if the Stars need to be at their best in the postseason, Kyle Tucker, we're looking at you over the last couple of years. Right? You want Jordan healthy going into the postseason, and then you hope Altuve, Bregman, Yainer Diaz do enough that you don't have to get output from the bottom of an order where you expect to get very little, the composition of the 2024 Astros lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's just one playoff series, but I think the Astros scored one run in the first 15 innings of the postseason against the Tigers. We kind of talked about that here before, but it was a lot of this same stuff from the regular season where you'd have guys on base and you just couldn't get the big hit. Charlie talks about it, the bottom half of the Astros lineup, there's just not a whole lot there. So once you get past the big guys, good luck getting those runs in. But I'm concerned, especially with Kyle Tucker has not hit well in the last two postseasons. Jeremy Pena doesn't look like he's going to go back to 2022 form. It's just he had a good streak there, and now he's just kind of an average shortstop, and he doesn't walk a lot. Altuve's getting a little bit older. He didn't do much in those two games. And I know it's only two games and the playoffs are kind of fluky, but just the fact, like I said earlier, it was a lot of the stuff that we saw all season long. We were like, okay, the batting average is pretty good. The OPS is pretty good. But when it comes to scoring runs, they weren't very good at that. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but it says a lot when a team like Detroit can come in and just blow your doors off, bringing in pitcher after pitcher. And in the playoffs, you're going to see that where you're going to see bullpen games where one guy comes in throwing 97 miles an hour for an inning, and then they bring in another guy that can do that kind of thing, and you're not real familiar with them. When you play in the playoffs, you're going to have to deal with those situations. You're not always going to get a pitcher for 5 innings, and then finally you see him for the third time and you figure it out. That's just not how baseball really works anymore. So I think they got to figure out something, and it's no surprise the Yankees and the Dodgers, all the money they have, but you look at the Yankees' big three. Well, the Astros have a big three, too, with Tucker and Jordan and Altuve. It's just, the last couple of years, they haven't produced in the postseason.
And, the entire Yankees bullpen that will be active in the World Series was in the American League Championship Series. The rich, lavish, spend at all costs Yankees, their entire bullpen makes less than Josh Hader. Asset allocation matters when you're planning going forward, and you have Hader at $19 million, and Presley, unless you can offload somehow, he agrees to be traded at $14 million, and then the deader than dead dollars of Abreu and Montero, and in all likelihood McCullers, and at least half, if not all, 2025 Christian Javier. Right, the chickens have come home to roost for the Astros. It's not close to being a great team anymore.
Which is the cost of success when you do have such a dynastic run over almost a decade. And going back to what you said, Josh, about the revolving door of bullpen arms, that seemed to be one of the Astros' secrets to success. Was they would hold on to games, and then they could pick on somebody out of the bullpen, because if you brought in so many guys, typically you'd find one guy that was having an off day, and on that day you could get it. Now, granted, when you're in a 2-game, at a best of 3-game series, you don't have that opportunity to see those guys over and over again and start to learn them the way you do in a longer series. But if you don't finish in the top 2, well, guess what? You're not going to get that bye, and you're going to have to play in a wild card series. And so, it does make it more imperative that you jump on guys early or be more competitive with some of the better guys that are there. And it's not like the Astros got blown out. I mean, obviously their pitching was good enough to keep them close, but it just never really felt like the Astros had the offensive firepower to make any real hay in the postseason. And I don't necessarily think that had they got past the Tigers, it would have been any different. I mean, maybe it would have been. Maybe that would have been the difference. Maybe the old confidence would have kicked in, but I'm not real sure. And going back to the Yankees, they missed the postseason in 23, are now headed to the World Series in 24. Does New York go to the World Series? Do you think that motivates Jim Crane to make a more splashy move to retake their place in the postseason, or does this make him more patient to, considering the fact that the Yankees did have to kind of take a step back to take a step forward?
Well, I think unless budget constraints are out the window, the Astros are going to be extremely hard pressed to make a splash move. They don't have a farm system to make what you would consider a blockbuster trade acquisition. And in what's a relatively thin free agent market, especially the non-pitcher side of things, right, the big splash would be overpaying Alex Bregman to keep him as an Astro. And then the Astros are already knocking on the door of the second competitive balance tax threshold for 2025. You said, if not exactly, Brandon, that all things come to an end, or at least wind down. Right? The Astros are on the back end of this glory era, which does not mean they're doomed at all for 2025 and in a weak American League West. But in terms of being a superpower, you look at the roster, you look at the pitching staff, it's not there. This is the first World Series since 2013 that the best team for the season in the American League and the best team for the season in the National League both actually make the World Series. Right? The Yankees were the best team over the course of the full season in the AL, the Dodgers in the NL. This will be a rarity, right? Postseason baseball has a lot of Russian roulette attached to it, with the 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5 before you get to a league championship series. So the point is to get in the tournament and give yourself a chance, right? The Dodgers faced elimination twice against the Padres. The Yankees beat Cleveland in 5, but a couple of those were hammer and tong, could go either way games with the Guardians. So I don't think Jim Crane's going to overreact and say, we'll carry a $300 million payroll. Go get our Juan Soto. The Yankees had the farm system to make the best offer to acquire Juan Soto. The Astros can't compete with that.
They can't. And the Yankees did reset, but after they reset, they went for the jugular right there, the Juan Soto trade, knowing full well that if they end up winning the World Series, they probably are going to have to cut him a blank check to stick around. That's what Yankees fans expect. That's kind of their MO for all these years. We'll see how that plays out, but I think Jim Crane's going to be a little more patient. Charlie mentioned the weak division, and then once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. And they're already up against it. And we were talking about the bullpen a little bit ago. Back when in 2022, when Click was the GM, the bullpen was a lot more inexpensive. I mean, they had a lot of guys that weren't making a ton of money. They weren't paying Presley and Hader and all these big ticket guys. They still had Presley, but it wasn't what it is now. You had Phil Maton and Ryan Stanek and guys like that weren't making a whole bunch of money that gave you important innings. And, Hector Neris to some extent, but he wasn't getting crazy money. He was getting a fair amount of money, but yeah, just the approach has changed. And the analytics guys, they don't want to spend a ton of money on their bullpen. They want to allocate that money to other positions. And Astros have kind of gotten upside down in that area now. And I mean, these are guaranteed contracts. At least, Presley should come off the books after this season. We'll see what they do there. Hector Neris is a free agent, but he wasn't making much anyway because the Cubs cut him. But I don't know how much they can do. That's the problem. But no move might be the right move here. What if Hader bounces back and has an ERA in the ones next season, and Presley kind of stays steady with what he is? Abreu takes another step, becomes your eighth inning guy. Things could work out in your favor. So I think patience is probably the way to go here, because I don't know if Jim Crane really has any other move.
Yeah, that's the pitching side. Offensively, is Chas McCormick going to revive himself and his career, be given an opportunity to do so? Jake Myers, wonderful center fielder and going and get the ball, right? Noodle arm, whatever a noodle bat worse would be, what he was the second half of the season. There are a lot of center fielders who can go get the ball. But Jake Myers is among them and ranks very highly among them, is fine. But when the counterbalance is an absolute dead weight offensive player, can you do better than there? Can you do better than him there? Can it be some of Chas McCormick? Jacob Melton, the supposed present Astros number one prospect, despite lackluster numbers at AA and AAA, decent finish at Sugarland, but the overall numbers, 24 years old already, so he's no phenom. Right? You look all over Major League Baseball, there are young stars galore excelling at the major league level, younger than 24. So that Jacob Melton, he's the Astros' big savior in the outfield right now, man. But they need something to hit. And a healthy season, unless he's traded, out of Kyle Tucker, naturally would improve the Astros offense over 162 games. Wither third base, and is there at least a modicum of improvement that Jeremy Pena, now 27 years old, can make in his fourth season?
Charlie, you mentioned the farm system. Probably time to bring that up. Seemingly every season, the Astros have someone from the farm system that comes up from out of nowhere and contributes. Chas McCormick, big contributor in 2022 and 23. Jeremy Pena in 2022. Yainer Diaz in 2023. Spencer Arrighetti this year. But Charlie, you noted on a past episode, the Astros did not have a rookie even in the conversation for Rookie of the Year in 2024. The farm system was ranked 30th this season. Brian McTaggart just did an article on some young guys to watch for in 2025. He listed Jacob Melton, who is, as you said, their number one prospect, Bryce Matthews, who is their number three prospect, and right-handed pitcher Ryan Gusto, who is currently unranked. Do any of those guys give you any hope that they can inexpensively fill some gaps for Houston next season?
If you're one of the three best snow skiing Saudi Arabians, it doesn't mean you're going to win a medal at the Olympics. Now, there is hope. Bryce Matthews is a young guy, very toolsy. He was awful in his taste at AAA, real contact trouble. Question whether he can handle shortstop defensively at the major league level. But at least he's 22 years old. You cross your fingers and hope that he can make a leap. Gusto's numbers were all right. Factor in that AAA is a league-wide launch pad, so the pitchers generally are a bit better than their statistics look on the surface. The hitters, Loperfido, Leon, etc., not as good as their numbers look on the surface. So among Gusto, Blubaugh, and Colton Gordon, right, if one of those can be a 4 or 5 starter, as the Framber Valdez decision looms. And you have Brown and Blanco. Right, Arrighetti was the Astros Rookie of the Year. I mean, he was better in the second half, but his ERA was 4.53. He was a well below average pitcher. Right, he's not a Rookie of the Year candidate. 9 of the prior 10 seasons, the Astros had a rookie finish top 5 in the American League Rookie of the Year voting. Not going to be the case when that balloting is disclosed in November this year, and they have no one on the horizon who's going to be mentioned as a serious rookie of the year candidate going into 2025. May they get a very positive surprise on that front, or in the scientific community, brain drain, the talent drain of the Astros. The leak continues, especially if Bregman is gone, because Zach DeCenzo would get my first crack over Shea Whitcomb, but he wouldn't be a top 3 or 4 prospect in anybody's system, right? He happens to be the best the Astros have at third base right now, unless maybe Matthews gets a look there at some point. So it's not desperate times for the Astros organizationally, but I think I said a few weeks ago, whereas they were the envy of Major League Baseball, from what they had at the top of their Major League roster to the depth of the minor league system, soup to nuts, almost everyone would have traded everything they have for the Astros. Now, maybe half the teams would think about it.
Yeah, I'm not super excited about any of these options. Maybe Gusto can come up and be a back of the rotation guy, and that would be nice because you don't know what Luis Garcia is going to give you. We know the deal with McCullers, but it feels like Matthews and Melton, I think they're still another year away. And Charlie mentioned Melton's already getting older, but they haven't shown you anything at AAA, even though Matthews was there a very small amount of time. But when he was there, and Melton, they're not putting up numbers that say we got to get this guy to the big leagues right away. He's clearly surpassed this level of competition. They're not at that point yet, and perhaps halfway through this year they'll take that next step, and maybe you get some new talent halfway through the season to give you some juice. But as of right now, I wouldn't give it much thought that they're going to come in and make a big splash starting the season coming out of spring.
And 2/3 of the outfield at this point stinks. Right, Jordan is going to be full-time DH or close to it, we would presume, going forward. So, all right, Tucker, unless he's moved, is the anchor for one more season in right field. Myers was an offensive embarrassment in center. McCormick was just a train wreck the whole year. They were reduced to lucking into getting some productivity out of Ben Gamel and then Jason Hayward. Well, neither of those guys are going to be here. Dubon is a minus offensive player. Stick him in left some. So there is work to do, but how much license will Dana Brown have to take on any payroll, be it via trade or in the trade market? They really need an internal answer to blossom.
And going back to our conversation about Dusty Baker in the prior episode, or part 1 of this conversation, you have to wonder who's actually making those decisions overall, or if it isn't a part of that decision by committee thing that we've kind of been talking about for the past couple of seasons now, where it seems like, the GM is a part of it, but also Jim Crane is a part of it. Jeff Bagwell seems to be a part of it. And to whatever extent Reggie Jackson's a part of it. So we're going to find out the rubber's going to hit the road here very soon. And we're going to see, where the decision-making on this team lies relative to where it was, which, Charlie, as you mentioned, was one of the league's best, one of the most revered and envied.
I want to get this in before we get out, whether it's sooner or later. If forced to watch the entire World Series, I'm not going to say who are you rooting for. Who would you root harder against between the Yankees and Dodgers?
Brandon?
You can't just root for ejections and errors, and certainly don't root for injuries.
Well, I don't have the graphic in front of me. I'll put it on in post-production, but there was a graphic that I saw on Twitter that had the rooting interests of the U.S., and it had Southern California blue for L.A., and it had Massachusetts, the state of Massachusetts, blue for L.A. as well. For the rooting interests of New York, it showed the New York metropolitan area and Florida as the rooting interests for New York. And then the rest of the country in red, symbolizing a giant meteor hitting the earth. I think that I guess I like Ohtani. I don't have any rooting interest against him. I think he's a once in a lifetime player. So seeing him win a World Series would be cool. I wouldn't hate it. I don't know that I look at the New York Yankees and I don't think I can root for any of those guys. I mean, Garrett Cole has just rubbed us all so wrong in this market. We have a history with Aaron Judge. Juan Soto is taken the Astros behind the woodshed in previous postseasons. So yeah, I think if I had to, my rooting interest against is more New York, but just because I think the Ohtani factor tilts it for me.
Yeah. Do you want to be thrown off a cliff or shot in the face? Those are our two options here. I think I'm with Brandon, though. It's just that rivalry with New York is, we're still in the middle of it. We're still playing Aaron Judge every year and trying to compete against those guys, with the Yankees being in the American League and all the history those teams have had in the playoffs over the last several years. Whereas, with the Dodgers, that was back in 2017, and a lot of roster turnover since that happened. Now Clayton Kershaw coming out and making more sign stealing comments in recent weeks certainly isn't helping the cause. But yeah, I guess I'd lean towards the Dodgers if I had to pick.
I'll make this counterpoint. And again, not that any Astros fan could ever swallow enough bile to root for the Yankees. But when this era is looked back upon, right, the Astros now, it's 7 League Championship Series appearances in 8 years, 4 World Series appearances, 2 World Series victories. Well, if the Dodgers win this World Series, they match the Astros on all those except for the consecutive LCS appearances, but trump them in others. Right? The Dodgers have now won their division 11 out of 12 years, and the one they didn't win, they won 106 games, and then avenged that, taking the Giants out in the playoffs. Right? This would be the Dodgers' second World Series in this window. And I know natural Astros fans, it didn't count, it was the short season. Yeah, as if the Astros had won the World Series that season, Astros fans would be throwing the fish back. No, we don't want that one. It doesn't count. The Dodgers now, this is 6 LCS appearances in this run of Dodger baseball. So the Yankees, it's a fluke. They're in the World Series for the first time in 15 years. Maybe it'll take them another 15 years. So if they win one, whatever, rather than the Dodgers winning their second within the same era that the Astros have won their 2.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. It's asking me what kind of cancer do I want, and there's no real good options there. So,
well, what can't happen, because he's been injured and out in the playoffs, Joe Kelly to give up a game-losing Game 7 home run and the Yankees winning it that way. That probably could actually sell to Astros fans, but Joe Kelly, like us, well, like me, will be watching the World Series. I don't want to speak for you guys.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we'll cut it there. That's going to be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you listen on podcasts on places like Apple or Spotify, do us a solid. Give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate it. That helps people find our podcast. Charlie, Josh, and I, we hope that you'll join us next week. But you don't have to wait that long to get your Houston sports fix. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel, Sports Map Houston, and our other channel, Sports Map Texans, on YouTube. We'll have more content for you during the week, including Colts Texans preview over on Sports Map Texans. Thanks for listening. Until next time, go Stros.